Marcus Thompson never thought much about the small tattoo on his forearm until that Tuesday morning in September. He had gotten it during a wild weekend in college 23 years ago, when he and his buddies decided to commemorate their spring break trip to a tiny beach town in Mexico. The design was simple enough, a series of numbers and symbols that the tattoo artist claimed represented eternal friendship in some ancient language. Marcus had been too drunk to question it, and his friends had similar markings done that same night. Now, at 45, Marcus worked as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech company in Denver. His life was predictably routine: coffee at 6:30, emails by 7, meetings until lunch, more coding until 5, then home to his wife Sarah and their 2 teenage kids. The tattoo had faded over the years, becoming just another part of his body that he barely noticed while showering or changing clothes. That particular Tuesday started like any other. Marcus was running late for a client presentation, rushing through his morning routine when Sarah called out from the kitchen. Her voice carried an unusual edge of excitement that made him pause while buttoning his shirt. "Marcus, you need to see this," she said, waving her tablet in the air. "Remember that documentary I was watching last night? The one about military secrets?" He glanced at his watch, knowing he had exactly 12 minutes to grab coffee and make the 20-minute drive to the office. "Can it wait? I'm already behind schedule." Sarah ignored his protest, practically bouncing on her toes as she thrust the tablet toward him. On the screen was a paused video showing what appeared to be a military briefing room. Several men in uniform stood around a large table covered with maps and documents. The image was grainy, clearly taken from archival footage. "Look at this guy's arm," Sarah said, pointing to a figure partially visible in the frame. "Doesn't that look familiar?" Marcus squinted at the screen, adjusting his glasses. There, on the forearm of a man in military fatigues, was a tattoo. The image quality made it difficult to make out details, but the general pattern of numbers and symbols looked remarkably similar to his own. "That's probably just a coincidence," Marcus said, though something about the marking made his stomach tighten. "Lots of people have number tattoos." Sarah shook her head, rewinding the video to replay the segment. "This documentary is about classified military operations from the 1980s. They're talking about how soldiers used coded tattoos to identify themselves during covert missions. Marcus, what if your tattoo isn't just some random design?" The coffee maker beeped, filling the kitchen with its familiar aroma, but Marcus found himself staring at the screen instead of rushing to fill his travel mug. The man in the video moved slightly, giving a clearer view of his forearm. The resemblance to Marcus's own tattoo was unsettling. "That's impossible," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I got this thing in Mexico during spring break. It was just a bunch of drunk college kids making stupid decisions." Sarah paused the video again, zooming in on the tattoo. "But what if the tattoo artist wasn't just some random guy? What if he was former military? What if he recognized something about you and your friends that made him think you were recruits or something?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he remembered that weekend more clearly. The tattoo parlor hadn't been in the touristy part of town where most college students went. They had wandered into a rougher neighborhood after a night of heavy drinking, following some locals who promised them an authentic experience. The tattoo artist had been an older American man with weathered hands and a knowing smile. He had asked them questions that seemed odd at the time, about their majors, their plans after graduation, whether they had any military family members. "His name was Eddie," Marcus said slowly, the memory surfacing like a bubble rising through water. "Eddie Martinez. He said he used to work for the government before opening the tattoo shop." Sarah's eyes widened. "Government work? Marcus, what if he was CIA or something? What if he gave you guys real military codes?" The rational part of Marcus's mind wanted to dismiss this as his wife's overactive imagination, combined with too many conspiracy documentaries. But he couldn't shake the memory of Eddie's intense stare as he worked on the tattoo. The way he had insisted on a specific design despite Marcus asking for something different. The strange questions about their backgrounds. His phone buzzed with a text from his boss asking about his location. The client presentation was in 8 minutes, and he was still standing in his kitchen in a half-buttoned shirt, staring at a documentary about military secrets. "I have to go," he said, grabbing his coffee and keys. "We'll talk about this tonight, okay? It's probably nothing, but we can research it more if you want." As Marcus drove to work, his mind kept returning to that spring break weekend. He tried to remember more details about Eddie Martinez and the tattoo parlor. Had there been military memorabilia on the walls? Had Eddie seemed unusually interested in their personal information? The more he thought about it, the more questions arose. At a red light, Marcus pulled up his sleeve and looked at his tattoo in the bright morning sunlight. What he had always seen as a random collection of numbers and symbols now seemed more purposeful, more deliberate. The arrangement wasn't chaotic like he had remembered. There was a pattern, a structure that suggested meaning. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Tom Bradley, one of his college friends from that Mexico trip. They kept in touch sporadically, usually just Christmas cards and the occasional social media comment. "Marcus, you're not going to believe this," Tom said without preamble. "I just got the strangest phone call. Someone claiming to be from the Department of Defense asked about my tattoo. They want to meet with me this afternoon." Marcus's blood turned cold as he pulled into the office parking lot. "What did you tell them?" "I thought it was a prank at first, but they knew details about that weekend in Mexico that I've never told anyone. They knew about Eddie Martinez, about the tattoo parlor, even about what we were studying in college. Marcus, I think we might be in serious trouble." The client presentation was about to start, but Marcus found himself unable to move from his car. Whatever had started as Sarah's innocent observation about a documentary was quickly becoming something much more complicated and potentially dangerous. Marcus sat in his car outside the office building, engine running, air conditioning battling the Colorado heat while his world tilted off its axis. Tom's voice through the phone speaker sounded strained, almost panicked. "They knew about the tequila shots we had before going to the tattoo parlor," Tom continued. "They knew about Jenny crying because she was scared of needles. They knew about Mike passing out halfway through his tattoo. Marcus, how could they possibly know these things?" Marcus closed his eyes, trying to process what he was hearing. Jenny Walsh and Mike Rodriguez, the other two members of their spring break group. He hadn't spoken to either of them in over a year, maybe longer. Their lives had diverged after college, scattered across different states and careers. Did they say what they wanted? Marcus asked, watching other employees hurry past his car toward the building entrance. His client presentation had started 3 minutes ago. Just that they needed to verify some information about the tattoo and the circumstances surrounding how I got it. "They're sending someone to my office in Minneapolis this afternoon. Marcus, I'm freaking out here. What if we accidentally got involved in something illegal? What if that Eddie guy was running some kind of scam?" Marcus thought about the documentary Sarah had shown him, about the military codes and covert operations. "Tom, I need you to do something for me. Before you meet with whoever they're sending, call Jenny and Mike. Find out if they've been contacted too." "Already tried." Jenny's phone goes straight to voicemail, and Mike's office said he called in sick today, which is weird because Mike never takes sick days. Remember how he came to class with pneumonia junior year? The knot in Marcus's stomach tightened. Mike Rodriguez was the most reliable person he knew, the type who showed up early to everything and had never missed a day of work in his life. If Mike was suddenly unavailable on the same day government officials were making contact about their tattoos, it couldn't be a coincidence. Marcus's phone buzzed with another call. His boss again. The client presentation was now 5 minutes late and Marcus was supposed to be leading it. "Tom, I have to go, but promise me something. Don't meet with them alone. Bring a lawyer, or at least have someone else present. And record the conversation if you can. What about you? Have they contacted you yet?" Marcus looked at his office building, at the normal Wednesday morning routine of people going to work, dealing with ordinary problems like quarterly reports and budget meetings. "Not yet, but I have a feeling they will." After hanging up with Tom, Marcus sat for another moment trying to decide what to do. He could go into the office, pretend everything was normal, and hope this all blew over. Or he could take action, try to figure out what was happening before someone else controlled the narrative. He chose action. Marcus called his assistant and claimed a family emergency, asking her to reschedule the client presentation. Then he drove home, where Sarah was still in her pajamas, surrounded by printouts from her late-night internet research. "I've been digging deeper into this," she said as soon as he walked through the door. "That documentary was just the tip of the iceberg. Look at this." She had spread dozens of pages across their dining room table, articles about military tattoo codes, government databases of covert operatives, stories about civilians who had unknowingly become involved in intelligence operations. One article particularly caught Marcus's attention. The Forgotten Recruits: How the CIA Used Unconventional Methods to Identify Potential Assets in the 1990s. According to this, Sarah said, pointing to a highlighted passage, the agency would sometimes identify college students who showed certain psychological profiles: high intelligence, adaptability, willingness to take risks. They would track these individuals through various means, including placing coded identifiers on them during vulnerable moments. Marcus sank into a chair, the implications washing over him. Vulnerable moments like being drunk in a foreign country? Exactly. And look at this list of characteristics they looked for. Sarah handed him another printout. Computer science majors, students with high GPAs, individuals from military families, people with language skills or international travel experience. Marcus scanned the list, his unease growing. He had been a computer science major with a 3.8 GPA. His father had served in the Navy. He had spent a semester abroad in Germany. Tom was studying international relations and spoke fluent Spanish. Jenny was a psychology major who had lived in 3 different countries as a child. Mike was studying engineering and had already been accepted to graduate school at MIT. We weren't random college kids, Marcus realized aloud. We were exactly the type of people they were looking for. Sarah nodded grimly. And Eddie Martinez wasn't just some tattoo artist. I found a military records database online. Not supposed to be public, but you know how the internet is. Eduardo Martinez, Navy intelligence, served from 1975 to 1995. Specialized in covert recruitment and asset identification. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something about it looked official. The format suggested a government office. Mr. Thompson? The voice was crisp, professional, female. This is Agent Patricia Reeves with the Department of Defense Intelligence Agency. I need to speak with you about a tattoo you received in Mexico in 2001. Marcus looked at Sarah, who had gone pale. What about it? Mr. Thompson, I'm going to need you to come in for a briefing. There are some things about that tattoo that you need to understand. Can you be at the Federal Building downtown at 2 o'clock this afternoon? Am I in trouble? Do I need a lawyer? Agent Reeves paused. Mr. Thompson, you're not in trouble. But the situation is more complicated than you realize. That tattoo contains classified information that was never meant to be seen by civilian eyes. We need to discuss how to proceed. Marcus felt the room spinning slightly. Classified information? But it's just numbers and symbols. Those numbers and symbols represent coordinates and access codes for a military operation that was active from 1995 to 2003. Mr. Thompson, for the past 23 years you've been carrying state secrets on your arm. After Agent Reeves hung up, Marcus and Sarah sat in silence, staring at each other across the table covered with research papers. The normal sounds of their neighborhood, lawnmowers, dogs barking, children playing, seemed to come from another world, a simpler world where tattoos were just tattoos, and the biggest worry was being late for a client presentation. What are we going to do? Sarah whispered. Marcus looked down at his forearm, at the faded marks that had been part of his body for more than half his life. I guess I'm going to find out what secrets I've been carrying around. The Denver Federal Building looked more intimidating than Marcus had expected. Gray concrete and mirrored windows reflected the afternoon sun, giving the structure an imposing presence that made him feel small and vulnerable. He had arrived 15 minutes early, partly from nervousness and partly because Sarah had insisted he shouldn't be late for what might be the most important meeting of his life. Security was thorough, but professional. Metal detectors, X-ray machines, and guards who examined his identification with the kind of attention usually reserved for international airports. Marcus found himself wondering if this was how his life would be from now on. Security screenings in government buildings instead of software conferences and office meetings. Agent Patricia. Reeves met him in the lobby. She was younger than her voice had suggested over the phone, probably in her early 30s with short brown hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his appearance. Her handshake was firm, her manner polite but distant. Thank you for coming. Mr. Thompson, I know this situation must be confusing for you. She led him through a maze of corridors to a small conference room on the 3rd floor. The space was sterile and windowless, furnished with a metal table, 4 chairs, and a large monitor mounted on the wall. 2 other people were already seated. A man in his 50s wearing a colonel's uniform and a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen from the Defense Intelligence Agency. "Please, sit down," Agent Reeves said, gesturing to the chair facing the monitor. "We have a lot to discuss." Colonel Morrison, the nameplate on his uniform read, leaned forward with his hands clasped on the table. His expression was serious but not unfriendly. "Mr. Thompson, before we begin, I want to assure you that you're not in any legal trouble. However, the information we're about to share with you is classified and you'll need to sign a non-disclosure agreement." Marcus looked at the document Agent Reeves slid across the table. The legal language was dense and intimidating, full of phrases like national security implications and criminal penalties for unauthorized disclosure. "What if I don't sign it?" Marcus asked. Dr. Chen spoke for the first time, her voice calm and measured. "Then we can't tell you what your tattoo actually means, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering. But, Mr. Thompson, given that you've been carrying classified information on your body for over 2 decades, I think you deserve to know the truth." Marcus signed the document. Colonel Morrison activated the wall monitor, which displayed what appeared to be a military map, overlaid with coordinates and tactical symbols. In 1995, the Department of Defense initiated Operation Nightfall, a covert intelligence gathering mission focused on potential terrorist activities in Central and South America. The operation required the placement of deep cover assets and the establishment of secure communication networks. The map zoomed in on Mexico, highlighting several coastal towns. Marcus recognized one of them, Puerto Vallarta, about 50 miles from where he and his friends had gotten their tattoos. "Eduardo Martinez was one of our most experienced field operators," Agent Reeves continued. "His cover as a tattoo artist allowed him to interact with American civilians while maintaining contact with our intelligence networks. He was supposed to identify and recruit potential assets among college students who showed specific psychological and intellectual profiles." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "So we were being recruited?" "Not exactly," Dr. Chen said. "Martinez was operating under outdated protocols. By 2001, Operation Nightfall had been officially terminated, but Martinez continued his work without authorization. He had developed his own system for marking individuals he believed might be useful to intelligence operations in the future." The monitor displayed a close-up photograph of a tattoo identical to Marcus's. The image was crystal clear, showing every detail of the numbers and symbols that he had lived with for 23 years. "These markings," Colonel Morrison explained, "contain GPS coordinates for 3 safe houses, radio frequencies for emergency communications, and access codes for weapons caches that were part of the original Nightfall operation." Marcus stared at his forearm, seeing the familiar symbols in an entirely new light. "But why us? We were just college kids on spring break." Agent Reeves consulted a file folder. "According to Martinez's notes, which we recovered after his death in 2018, you and your friends represented ideal recruitment profiles. Marcus Thompson, computer science major, high analytical skills, father with military background. Thomas Bradley, international relations, language abilities, demonstrated leadership qualities. Jennifer Walsh, psychology background, adaptability, emotional intelligence. Michael Rodriguez, engineering expertise, technical aptitude, security clearance potential. You've been watching us for 23 years? Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Not actively watching, Dr. Chen clarified, but monitoring. Periodic background checks, professional assessments, general lifestyle evaluation. The tattoos made you persons of interest in our database. Marcus thought about his career progression, the security clearances he had received for certain government contracting projects, the way certain job opportunities had seemed to appear at exactly the right time. How much of my life has been influenced by this? Colonel Morrison exchanged glances with the two women before answering. More than you might think, but less than you probably fear. We've never manipulated your career directly, but your security clearances were expedited because of your existing status in our system. Certain opportunities were made available to you because we knew you could be trusted with sensitive information. The room fell silent as Marcus processed this information. Everything he had thought he knew about his own life suddenly seemed uncertain. Had he earned his success through his own merit, or had invisible government influence smoothed his path? What about my friends? He asked finally. Agent Reeves looked uncomfortable. Tom Bradley has been working as a cultural attaché at the embassy in Brazil for the past 5 years. His official title doesn't reflect the full scope of his duties. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him again. Tom had never mentioned being anything other than a regular State Department employee. "He's a spy?" "Intelligence officer," Dr. Chen corrected. He was recruited officially in 2019, though he doesn't know about the connection to his tattoo. As far as he knows, he was selected through normal channels. And the others? Jennifer Walsh is currently a therapist specializing in trauma counseling for military personnel. Michael Rodriguez works for a defense contractor developing cybersecurity systems. Both have security clearances that were easier to obtain because of their existing status in our database. Marcus realized that none of them had ended up in truly random careers. They had all gravitated toward work that intersected with national security in some way. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "Why are you telling me this?" Colonel Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Because Operation Nightfall is being reactivated. The geopolitical situation in Central and South America has changed significantly since 2001. We need experienced personnel who can operate in that region without suspicion." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "You want to recruit me for real this time?" "We want to offer you a choice," Agent Reeves said. "You can continue your normal life, but with regular security briefings about protecting the information in your tattoo. Or you can accept an active role in the new operation." Dr. Chen added, "Either way, your life is going to change. The secret is out now, at least among the people in this room. You can't go back to not knowing what you've been carrying around." Marcus looked at the monitor, still displaying the detailed breakdown of his tattoo's hidden meaning. 23 years ago, a drunk college student had stumbled into a situation that would define the rest of his life without him even realizing it. Now he had to decide whether to embrace that reality or spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked. Colonel Morrison checked his watch. 72 hours. "But Mr. Thompson, you should know that your friends have already made their choices." The safe house was nothing like what Marcus had expected from movies and television shows. Instead of a grim military compound or isolated cabin in the woods, they were taken to a comfortable suburban home in Aurora, about 30 minutes from their own neighborhood. The house looked completely ordinary from the outside, two-story colonial with a well-maintained lawn and a basketball hoop in the driveway. Inside, however, the differences became apparent. Windows had been reinforced with bulletproof glass. Security cameras were discreetly positioned in every room. The basement had been converted into a communications center with multiple computer workstations and satellite uplinks. Agent Reeves explained that the house served as both protection and operational headquarters. Marcus's children, Emma and Jake, took the disruption better than he had expected. 16-year-old Emma was annoyed about missing school and concerned about her part-time job at the local bookstore. 14-year-old Jake seemed almost excited by the adventure, asking endless questions about whether they would get new identities and if this was permanent. "How long will we be here?" Sarah asked Agent Reeves as they settled into what would be their temporary home. "That depends on how quickly we can neutralize the threat and how long the operational phase lasts," Agent Reeves replied. "Could be weeks, could be months." Tom Bradley arrived the next morning looking haggard and older than his years. The easygoing friend Marcus remembered from college had been replaced by someone who carried himself with the quiet alertness of a professional intelligence officer. They embraced awkwardly, both of them trying to process how their relationship had changed. "I can't believe Mike and Jenny are gone," Tom said as they sat in the safe house's kitchen, drinking coffee that tasted like it came from a military commissary. "Did you know?" Marcus asked. "About your real job, I mean. Did you know you were recruited because of the tattoo?" Tom shook his head. "Not until yesterday. I thought I had been selected for embassy work because of my language skills and cultural background. Finding out that my entire career path was influenced by something that happened during spring break, it's a lot to process." Agent Reeves joined them at the table, carrying a thick folder of documents. "Gentlemen, we need to discuss your roles in the reactivated Operation Nightfall. The situation in Central America has become critical, and we need experienced assets who can't be easily traced back to American intelligence." She opened the folder, revealing photographs of various locations throughout Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. "Drug cartels have formed alliances with terrorist organizations. creating a pipeline for moving both narcotics and potential threats into the United States. We need to re-establish the intelligence networks that were dismantled when the original operation ended. Marcus studied the photographs, recognizing some of the locations from his spring break trip decades ago. What exactly would we be doing? You would return to Mexico ostensibly as tourists or business travelers. Your tattoos would serve as identification for remaining assets from the original operation. You would reactivate communication networks, assess current threats, and establish new intelligence gathering protocols. Tom leaned forward, his expression serious. And the people trying to kill us? What happens to them? Colonel Morrison is handling that situation through official channels. However, eliminating the immediate threat doesn't solve the long-term problem. There will always be factions within the intelligence community who oppose certain operations. The only way to ensure your permanent safety is to complete this mission successfully and prove that Operation Nightfall serves vital national security interests. Sarah, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the kitchen. What about our families? What about our children's education, our careers, our lives? Agent Reeves turned to address her directly. Mrs. Thompson, I understand this is difficult. Your children will continue their education through a secure online program. Your husband's employer has been briefed on a cover story about family emergency leave. When this operation concludes successfully, you'll be able to return to your normal lives. And if it doesn't conclude successfully? Sarah asked. The agent's pause was answer enough. Over the next few days, Marcus and Tom underwent intensive briefings about the current situation in Central America. They learned about cartel operations, terrorist financing networks, and the specific intelligence gaps that Operation Nightfall was designed to address. The scale of the problem was much larger than Marcus had imagined. Dr. Chen arrived on the third day to conduct psychological evaluations and operational readiness assessments. Marcus found himself seated across from her in the same sterile interview style as their first meeting, but this time the dynamic was different. She was evaluating him as a potential asset, rather than briefing him as a civilian. Your technical background makes you valuable for establishing secure communications, Dr. Chen explained. The original Operation Nightfall relied heavily on radio frequencies and basic encryption. Modern operations require sophisticated digital security and satellite communications. Marcus thought about his career in software engineering, all the security protocols and encryption systems he had worked with over the years. You're saying my professional development was influenced by this too? Guided might be a better word, Dr. Chen replied. Certain opportunities were made available. Certain projects were steered your way. You developed genuine expertise, but in areas that would be useful for intelligence work. How much of my life has been real? Marcus asked. Dr. Chen considered the question carefully. Your relationship with your wife, your love for your children, your friendships, your personal growth. Those things are completely real. Your professional development was influenced, but your talents and work ethic are your own. Think of it as having had a very specialized career counselor working behind the scenes. That evening, Marcus sat with Sarah in their temporary bedroom, both of them staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of their new reality. I keep thinking about that weekend in Mexico, Sarah said. If you hadn't gone on that trip, if you had chosen a different spring break destination, our entire lives would have been different. Marcus turned to look at her. Do you regret it? Marrying someone who apparently comes with this much baggage? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I regret that you didn't know. I regret that we've been living with this invisible influence without understanding it. But I don't regret our life together, even if it turns out some external forces helped shape it. Agent Reeves says the mission should take about 6 months, Marcus said. If we can re-establish the intelligence networks and prove that the operation is viable, we should be able to come back to something close to normal life. And if we can't? Marcus didn't have an answer for that question. The alternative, permanent relocation, new identities, abandoning everything they had built together, was too overwhelming to contemplate. His phone buzzed with a secure message from Agent Reeves. Final briefing tomorrow morning. Departure scheduled for Monday. Team assembly complete. Marcus showed the message to Sarah, who read it twice before setting the phone aside. Team assembly? She asked. I think that means they found other people with the same tattoos, Marcus replied. Other civilians who got marked by Eduardo Martinez without knowing what it meant. As he fell asleep that night, Marcus tried to imagine what the next 6 months would bring. He would be returning to Mexico not as a carefree college student, but as a middle-aged intelligence operative carrying decades-old secrets on his skin. The tattoo that had once been a symbol of youthful recklessness had become the key to his family's future safety and his country's security. Tomorrow would bring the final briefing, and then there would be no turning back. Marcus drove home in a daze, the colonel's final words echoing in his mind. His friends had already made their choices. What did that mean exactly? Had Tom known about his true role all along? Was Jenny's job counseling military personnel really just a cover? Had Mike's defense contractor position been more than just cybersecurity work? Sarah was waiting in the kitchen when he arrived, her laptop open and surrounded by even more printed articles than when he had left. She looked up as he entered, her face tight with worry. "How did it go?" she asked, though his expression probably told her everything she needed to know. Marcus sat down heavily at the kitchen table, still trying to process everything he had learned. "It's real, Sarah, all of it. The tattoo contains actual military codes. I've been carrying around state secrets for 23 years without knowing it." He told her everything about Eduardo Martinez, Operation Nightfall, the coordinates and access codes hidden in his tattoo, the surveillance they had been under for more than 2 decades. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each revelation. "They want to recruit me," Marcus concluded. "Officially this time. They're reactivating the operation, and they need people who can't be easily traced back to intelligence agencies." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at her laptop screen. "While you were gone, I did some more research. I found something you need to see." She turned the laptop toward him, showing a news article from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune dated that morning. The headline read, "Local engineer dies in apparent accident during federal building visit." Marcus's blood turned cold as he read the article. Mike Rodriguez, 38 years old, had apparently suffered a heart attack while visiting a government office in Minneapolis. He had been found unconscious in a conference room and was pronounced dead at the hospital an hour later. "Mike never had heart problems," Marcus said numbly. "He ran marathons. He was in better shape than any of us." Sarah pointed to another article she had found. "This one's from Portland. Jenny Walsh was found dead in her apartment yesterday evening. Apparent suicide, according to the police report." Marcus felt the room spinning around him. Jenny had been the most psychologically stable person he knew. Someone who had dedicated her life to helping others deal with trauma. The idea of her committing suicide was impossible to believe. "They killed them," he whispered. "Mike and Jenny said no, so they killed them." Sarah shook her head, though she didn't look convinced by her own words. Maybe it really was just coincidence. Maybe the stress of finding out about the tattoos was too much. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. Tom Bradley's number appeared on the screen, but when Marcus answered, it wasn't Tom's voice. "Mr. Thompson, this is Agent Reeves. I'm calling from Mr. Bradley's phone because he asked me to contact you. He's currently in our protective custody." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "Protective custody? From what?" "From the same people who got to your other 2 friends. Mr. Thompson, there are elements within the intelligence community who don't want Operation Nightfall reactivated. They've been eliminating anyone connected to the original mission, including civilians like yourselves who might have knowledge of the old operational parameters." Sarah leaned closer, trying to hear both sides of the conversation. "So Mike and Jenny were murdered?" Marcus asked. "We believe so, though we can't prove it yet. The methods were sophisticated enough to appear accidental or self-inflicted. Mr. Thompson, you and Mr. Bradley are the only surviving members of your group. We need to get you into protective custody immediately." Marcus looked at Sarah, seeing his own fear reflected in her eyes. Their children were at school, unaware that their father had become a target in some invisible war between government agencies. "What about my family?" Marcus asked. "They'll be protected too, but only if you accept our offer to join the reactivated operation. If you refuse, we can't guarantee your safety or theirs." The line went quiet except for the sound of Marcus's own heartbeat. Agent Reeves was essentially giving him an ultimatum. Join the operation or risk ending up like Mike and Jenny. "Who's trying to kill us?" Marcus asked. "A faction within the Defense Intelligence Agency that believes Operation Nightfall was compromised from the beginning. They think anyone with knowledge of the mission parameters represents a security risk that needs to be eliminated." Marcus thought about Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been in the meeting that afternoon. Had she been part of the faction trying to protect them, or was she working with the people who wanted them dead? "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Marcus asked. "How do I know you're not the ones who killed Mike and Jenny?" Agent Reeves paused before answering. "Because if we wanted you dead, Mr. Thompson, you wouldn't have made it home from the federal building this afternoon." The brutal honesty of her statement was somehow reassuring. Marcus made his decision. "What do I need to do?" "Pack light bags for you and your family. Essential items only. We'll pick you up in 30 minutes. You'll be relocated to a safe house while we finalize the operational details." After hanging up, Marcus looked at Sarah, who had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "We have to run," he said simply. Sarah nodded, already standing up to go upstairs. "I'll pack for the kids. You get your things together." As they moved through their house, grabbing clothes and necessities, Marcus felt like he was watching someone else's life fall apart. This morning he had been a software engineer worried about a client presentation. Now he was packing to enter some kind of witness protection program because a tattoo he got in college contained military secrets. "Marcus," Sarah called from upstairs. "What about our jobs? The kids' school? Our mortgage?" "I don't know," he called back, throwing his laptop and a few changes of clothes into a duffel bag. "I guess the government will have to figure that out." He paused in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at his reflection. The man staring back at him looked older than he had that morning, worn down by revelations and loss. He rolled up his sleeve and examined the tattoo that had changed everything. The numbers and symbols looked the same as they always had, but now Marcus could see the pattern Agent Reeves had shown him. Coordinates disguised as decorative elements, access codes hidden within what he had thought were meaningless flourishes. For 23 years he had been a walking, breathing security breach without knowing it. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Black SUV in your driveway in 5 minutes. Bring only what you packed. Leave everything else." Marcus went upstairs to find Sarah and the kids' packed bags sitting on their bed. Sarah was standing at the window looking out at their quiet suburban street. "I keep thinking this is all a dream," she said without turning around. "This morning we were worried about whether the dishwasher needed to be repaired. Now we're running for our lives because of something that happened before our kids were even born." Marcus put his arms around her from behind, feeling her tension. "We'll get through this. Whatever they want me to do, however long it takes, we'll get through it and get our life back." Sarah leaned against him. "What if we can't? What if this is our life now?" Before Marcus could answer, they heard the sound of car doors closing in their driveway. Their ride to whatever came next had arrived. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the same beach in Puerto Vallarta where his life had unknowingly changed 24 years earlier. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, just as it had during that spring break trip when he was young and naive enough to get a tattoo, without asking what it meant. The mission had been successful, though not in the way anyone had expected. When Marcus and Tom had returned to Mexico in the spring, they had indeed found remnants of the original Operation Nightfall network. Eduardo Martinez had trained several protégés before his death, local assets who had maintained communication protocols in safe houses even after the official operation ended. But what they discovered was far more complex than a simple intelligence network. Martinez had been running his own operation for years, identifying and marking dozens of American college students with coded tattoos. Some contained legitimate military intelligence like Marcus's group. Others contained financial account numbers, communication frequencies for drug operations, and even coordinates for weapons caches that had nothing to do with government operations. Martinez had been playing multiple sides, working with American intelligence, Mexican cartels, and his own private network of informants and assets. The tattoos were his way of keeping track of his various operations and the people involved in them. The revelation had changed everything about the mission. Instead of reactivating a dormant intelligence network, Marcus and Tom found themselves helping to unravel decades of unauthorized operations that had put dozens of innocent civilians at risk. "We found 11 other people with tattoos like yours," Agent Reeves had explained during one of their secure video calls from Mexico. "A lawyer in Phoenix, a teacher in Seattle, a restaurant owner in Miami. All college students who visited Martinez's shop between 1995 and 2010, all carrying information they never should have." Had some of the other tattoo recipients had unknowingly been carrying cartel communication codes. Others had coordinates for illegal weapons shipments. One woman in Chicago had been walking around for 15 years with the bank account numbers for a money laundering operation tattooed on her shoulder. The mission became about protecting these civilians while dismantling Martinez's unauthorized network. Marcus's technical skills proved invaluable in identifying and neutralizing the digital components of the operation, while Tom's cultural knowledge helped navigate the complex relationships between various factions in Mexico. The work was dangerous. There had been 2 attempts on their lives, one from cartel members who wanted to protect their communication networks, another from a rogue CIA faction that wanted to eliminate anyone with knowledge of Martinez's unauthorized activities. But the security team Agent Reeves had assembled was professional and thorough. Now, as Marcus prepared to return home to Sarah and the kids, he reflected on how much had changed. The tattoo on his arm looked the same, but its meaning had evolved once again. It was no longer a symbol of youthful recklessness or government secrets. It had become a reminder of how one person's actions could ripple through decades, affecting lives in ways that were never intended. Tom joined him on the beach, carrying 2 bottles of local beer. They had grown closer during the mission, rediscovering the friendship that had been obscured by years of separation and hidden truths. "Hard to believe it's over," Tom said, settling into the sand beside Marcus. "Is it over?" Marcus asked. "Agent Reeves said there might be follow-up investigations for years. The dangerous part is over. The people who wanted to kill us are either in custody or neutralized. The remaining cartel networks have been dismantled. We can go back to our real lives." Marcus took a sip of his beer, savoring the familiar taste that brought back memories of that original spring break trip. "What is my real life, though? How do I go back to debugging software and attending parent-teacher conferences after this?" Tom was quiet for a moment, watching the waves roll up the beach. "I've been thinking about that too. The embassy job in Brazil. It turns out I'm actually good at it. The cultural work, the diplomatic relationships, even the intelligence-gathering aspects. Maybe this was always what I was supposed to be doing. You're staying with the government, officially this time. Full disclosure, proper recruitment, legitimate career path. Dr. Chen thinks I could run my own station in a few years." Marcus nodded, understanding the appeal. During the mission, he had discovered that he enjoyed the problem-solving aspects of intelligence work, the technical challenges of secure communications, and data analysis. Agent Reeves had already approached him about consulting opportunities with the Defense Intelligence Agency. "Sarah's been amazing through all of this," Marcus said. "The kids, too. Emma actually said she's proud of me for helping catch the bad guys. Are you going to take the consulting job?" Marcus looked down at his tattoo, running his finger over the faded lines that had caused so much trouble and ultimately led to so much growth. "I think so. Part-time, legitimate work with full disclosure to my family. It feels like the right way to close this chapter." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Tomorrow, Marcus would fly back to Denver, where Sarah and the children were waiting in their own house. The government had ensured their mortgage was current and their jobs were secure during the extended absence. Colonel Morrison had personally apologized for the disruption to their lives and had arranged for substantial compensation that would ensure the kids' college, educations, and early retirement if Marcus chose it. The official report would classify the entire operation, but Marcus and his family would always know the truth about what had happened. As they walked back toward the hotel, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Kids are excited to see you tomorrow. House feels empty without you. Love you." He showed the message to Tom, who smiled. "Sounds like your real life is waiting for you. What about you? Any chance of settling down, or is the spy life too exciting?" Tom laughed. "There's actually someone. Elena from the embassy in Brazil. Turns out having a complicated job makes it easier to connect with someone who understands complicated jobs." They reached the hotel lobby, where Agent Reeves was waiting with their travel documents and final debriefing materials. "Gentlemen," she said, standing as they approached, "I wanted to personally thank you for your service over these past 6 months. The intelligence networks you helped establish will protect American interests in this region for years to come." Marcus accepted the folder of documents that would officially close his involvement in Operation Nightfall. What happens to the other people with tattoos? The ones who didn't know what they were carrying? They're all being debriefed and compensated appropriately. Most of them will have their tattoos safely removed or modified to eliminate any security risks. A few, like yourselves, have chosen to maintain limited involvement with intelligence operations. And the people who tried to kill us? Agent Reeves's expression hardened slightly. The rogue faction within the DIA has been completely dismantled. 3 individuals are facing criminal charges, including Dr. Chen, who was feeding information to cartel contacts. The threat to you and your families has been permanently eliminated. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. For months, he had been looking over his shoulder, wondering if the next car that followed him too closely or the next stranger who made eye contact might be an assassin. "So, we can really go back to normal?" he asked. "As normal as you choose it to be," Agent Reeves replied. "You'll always have security clearances and access to certain opportunities if you want them. But you're also free to return to your previous life with no further obligations." That night, Marcus packed his belongings for the final time in months. The suitcase contained the same clothes he had hastily thrown together when fleeing Denver, along with a few items he had acquired during the mission: a watch from a grateful asset in Guadalajara, a book of poetry that Tom had given him, and a photograph of the beach where they had just spent their last evening. As he zipped the suitcase closed, Marcus looked one more time at his tattoo. Eduardo Martinez had intended it to be a tool of manipulation and control, a way of marking people for purposes they didn't understand. Instead, it had become the catalyst for the most meaningful period of Marcus's adult life, a time when he had discovered capabilities he didn't know he possessed and forged stronger relationships with both old friends and new family bonds. The flight home would take him back to Sarah, Emma, and Jake, back to their house in Denver and the life they had built together, but it would also take him back as a different person than the one who had left. He was still a software engineer and a father and a husband, but he was also someone who had served his country in ways he had never imagined, someone who had protected innocent people from dangers they never knew existed. The tattoo would remain on his arm for the rest of his life, but its meaning would continue to evolve. It was no longer a secret or a burden or a threat. It was simply part of his story, the visible reminder of how a moment of youthful carelessness had led to a lifetime of unexpected purpose.